Principle number 6 is how markets are usually a good way to organize economic activity. There are two ways that economies can go. One is to have a centralized economy. The other is to have a decentralized economy. In communist countries such as North Korea, Cuba in the past, and in some ways still China, central planning is used. With central planners, they make all the decisions about how to allocate an economy's scarce resources. However, what we are familiar with in a capitalist society is that a market economy allocates resources through the decentralized decisions of many firms and households as they interact in the market for goods and services. How are goods and services prices determined? Well, they're determined by supply and demand. Prices reflect the value of a product and the cost of production. In a market economy, no one is necessarily looking out for the economic well-being of society as a whole, and Adam Smith, the father of economics, has a lot to say on this point. So, you may have heard of Adam Smith, and you may have heard of his famous text, The Wealth of Nations, that was written in 1776. The term, the invisible hand, is a very famous term that, again, you may have heard of. He actually only uses that term twice in a book that runs almost 1,000 pages. There are two very important quotes that I'd like to share with you from this. First, it is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own self-interest or their own interest. Meaning that the butcher, the brewer, the baker, Facebook, Intel, Target, you name it, is not trying to sell you a product because they are concerned about your well-being. They want to put money in their own pocket. The way Adam Smith wrote it was that a butcher needs to put shoes on his children's feet. How is he going to do that? He's going to be doing that by selling you meat with a smile on his face and a sale maybe every other Thursday. The second quote, every individual neither intends to promote the public interest nor knows how much he is promoting it. He intends only his own security, and by directing that industry in such a manner as its produce may be of the greatest value, he intends only his own gain. And he is in this, as in many other cases, led by an invisible hand to promote an end which was no part of his intention. Let's translate this. What this means is that by having each individual look after their own self-interest, it actually leads to an economy that works. This is not to say that if everybody decided to volunteer all of their time and be a do-gooder, that society wouldn't work. But in Adam Smith's mind, that would actually lead to more problems. And so this is the underpinning of capitalism and self-interest. So here we go with Adam Smith's invisible hand, and that households and firms interact in a market. And if the government intervenes in this behavior, then sometimes they can do something good for the economy and sometimes not. So here we are at principle number 7. Governments can sometimes improve market outcomes. Think back to the Great Depression with unmitigated unemployment, a failing banking system, and stock market, 1929. Maybe that actually sounds like 2008 as well. This was a market failure of the greatest magnitude the U.S. had ever seen in 1929 until the Great Recession of 2008 to 2009. In 1929, this was a situation in which the market was left to its own devices until the government stepped in and used the New Deal. In 2008 and 2009, the government also stepped in, using something called Keynesian economics to underpin the economy by literally throwing $700 billion at it. Sometimes governments can make things worse. Price controls in the early 1970s were set up to combat inflation. This is under President Nixon. And this caused pent-up demand, as producers did not want to sell their products for the imposed price. When the controls were lifted, prices ran up to equilibrium, and inflation was rampant and much worse than before. So, sometimes government intervention is a positive thing, and sometimes it can interfere with both equality as well as a return to a normal economy.